Hey everybody, I'm Tommy. Let's try this one more time. You are on the lifeboat. I don't know if anybody made it over here. We'll see if they did. It's sadly they may be hanging out in the other chat. I did delete the stream. Whether or not anyone is ever going to see that, we will see. Jane Aldrich, how are you? I'm glad that you're here. It might just be you and me. Unfortunately, they've got this new deal going, and it is absolutely very difficult to understand. And you can set yourself up. I don't know if I have an entire group of people sitting in another chat, but it is what it is because I can't broadcast to that chat. So here I am. Rocket Queen, good to see you. ABAC, what's happening? Wes, Lightburn, End of Time Prophecy, Watchman for Jesus. Good to have you here. Jane, Monk, what's happening? So here we are. I have Rocket Queen. There you go. Pepperhead, glad you're here. I said I wasn't going to do a lot of hellos, but I'm going to because I'd like to give people time to get here in case they're trying to find me. Guru, I'm fine. How are you? I feel like I'm doing all right. I'm going to want to spend a ton of time on this. I have been looked at. Nothing is broken. I'm sore. Pat Allen, can't call me Mister, but Tommy will work. Glad you are here. Truthfully. So here's the deal, Mike Bragg. Hello again. Hello again. So I am healthy. I'm in pain. I don't feel fantastic, but it is what it is. Is Trump going to jail? Well, we're probably jumping the gun a bit on that one. I have from Jump Street always said that if the guy gives me something to go after him about, I most assuredly will do so. Whippy Island Girl, good to see you. Well, there are a lot of Trump haters on planet Earth who very much want this man to go to jail. Unfortunately, a lot of them don't care whether or not he's going to jail for something that he has done. This is a hard thing to be objective about, not because I give a crap about Trump, because currently I don't. Want a little bit more? Good to see you. I just don't. He's not my president. I'm not there anyway. But I also am very disappointed at how the Epstein thing has been handled by the Trump administration. But I have said from Jump Street, if the Democrats had stuff in the Epstein files, then they would have released him while they were instead doing Crossfire Hurricane and other things to try to get him out of office, which were absolutely BS. And we knew that they were BS. They've been proven to be BS. So when they start leaking stuff like this, thank you, Jane, appreciate that. When they start to leak stuff like this, you have to sort of take some of this with a grain of salt. However, I've gone through this stuff, and there's one email that I do find a bit distressing. So to bring you up to speed, on November 12th, the Democrats of the House Oversight Committee released a new batch of emails from the Jeffrey Epstein estate, part of over 23,000 documents highlighting his communications and including prominent figures like Donald Trump. There are 3 key emails out of these 20,000. And I assure you, the 20,000 were leaked or released, rather, to get to these 3 emails. The rest of them have a lot to do with things that don't seem to have a whole lot of relevance so far, anyway, on this case. But these 3 do. One is from 2011. Now, keep in mind, it's a hell of a long time ago. Epstein wrote about a victim spending, this was to Ghislaine Maxwell, allegedly. Allegedly, this is an email from Donald Trump to Ghislaine Maxwell. Epstein wrote about a victim spending hours at my house with Trump, noting Trump had never once been mentioned in investigations, calling him the dog that hasn't barked. The problem becomes that this woman doesn't have a... Caroline, if you know what, seriously, and are you basing that on Crossfire Hurricane? Are you basing that on the fact that he was convicted of rape, or what exactly are you basing that on? Caroline McGoldrick. Here's the deal. It's very difficult to know what's real and what's fake, especially when the impeachment of Donald Trump was completely fabricated information, right? The Steele dossier and all of the things that came out that they used as evidence have since been proven to be BS. We know that the government at the time had the laptop that belonged to Biden's son, and came out and signed statements saying this is a Russian disinformation campaign. 2 years they had that laptop. They knew everything that was in it for 2 years before they came out and said it's disinformation. They knew that it was actually real. So when all of these things happen, the guy may be the biggest scumbag in the world. I'm not a big fan of Donald Trump, but facts are kind of important. It reminds me a lot of some of the other things that have come up. For instance, the Diddy trial. I think Diddy is one of the worst people on earth. Well, you know something? That's absolute bupkis. I love you. I really do. But that's absolutely ridiculous. He's a bad guy because I can spot a bad guy. Well, that's not, there's no, court in America that's going to say, well, Caroline said, absolutely, this guy's a bad dude. You have to actually have things that you can prosecute for that aren't made up. So currently, we're trying to see if that is the case here. The problem with Ghislaine Maxwell is that she's already been sued for perjury once, and there are 6 cases of perjury that this woman has already been proved to lie on. As far as chain of custody says, okay, we have these emails. Where did they come from? Can we document when they came from, right? All of these things are important when you start talking about removing somebody from office or putting someone in prison, right? If you look at the laws that they passed in order to be able to prosecute Donald Trump, laws that they changed in order to be able to prosecute Donald Trump, these things become scary. I'm not a Trump fan, and I find this particular email really disturbing. I don't know that it's provably a fact yet. Simply, we don't know. However, that one is disturbing. Now, the rest of these people are going to find disturbing, and let's go through them. Number 2 is to Michael Wolff. Of course, Trump knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine Maxwell to stop. And by stop, they mean recruiting young girls from Mar-a-Lago. Email 3 is an exchange again with Michael Wolff ahead of the Republican debate. Epstein and Wolff discussed crafting a response for Trump if asked about Epstein. Wolff suggested letting Trump deny visits to Epstein's house or plane to gain valuable PR and political currency or create a debt if Trump won. Trump wasn't asked, but it shows Epstein's strategic interest in leveraging their past during Trump's campaign. That first email exchange with Michael Wolff came in 2015. Michael Wolff wrote a book about Donald Trump and didn't mention it in the book. He had these emails 3 years before he released the book. That to me doesn't pass the smell test. And when asked about it, he said, well, there were a lot of emails I probably didn't remember. There was an email that said, of course, Trump knew about the girls, and that didn't stick in the mind of Michael Wolff. The problem becomes that a lot of people don't know who Michael Wolff is. But this is a guy that has been he's a very bombastic author that destroys humans. That's what he does. He writes books designed to take people out. And I find it really odd that he was trying to take out Trump, but didn't mention there was an email from 2015 where Epstein himself said, yes, Trump knew about the girls. To me, folks, that doesn't pass the critical thinking smell test. It simply doesn't. I mean, you're trying to take this man out. You have the greatest bullet of all time, and it slips your mind until 2025. I don't think that passes the smell test. Number 3, when they're talking about Trump's dirtiness, right? Epstein commented on Trump's dirtiness in a 2018 email about Michael Cohen's plea deal, saying, you see, I know how dirty Donald is. He offered connections toward world leaders like for Steve Bannon and shared insights on Trump's foreign officials. These don't directly link Trump to Epstein's crimes. Nevertheless, there's going to be a lot of talk about them. A great deal of this is based on speculation. The one that I struggle with is the very first one. This is the Ghislaine Maxwell email that allegedly is from 2011. Epstein wrote about a victim spending hours at my house with Trump. Doesn't mean Trump was sleeping with her, but as I have always said, if you walk into a place and you see a 16-year-old girl walking around scantily dressed, yeah, you're going to have to take a look at calling the cops. If you were on the Lolita Express and half-naked 15-year-olds came out to rub feet and serve drinks, this is reason to go, I'm calling the cops. If you don't, you're complicit. The people that cooked on that island, in my opinion, are complicit. The people that were doing landscaping on that island are complicit. If you were watching this kind of thing go on, then obviously that is a problem. So while that email doesn't say anything about Trump being with a particular girl, if he was there and he saw a young woman walking around knowing that she was underage, we also know that Donald Trump has said about Epstein, of course, this was before his first conviction, but he said, yeah, he's a friend of mine. He's a good guy. Like, he really loves women and he likes them young. To me, that kind of corroborates this. Now, again, as far as these emails go, we don't know chain of custody. We don't know if they're real. It would be very easy to fake these. It would be. It also seems like it's coming at very convenient times. The Trump White House is gaining traction because of what has been going on with the lockdown. It is being sort of penned these days. Yeah, I agree, Jane Aldrich. Wolff is really a guy that his job is to destroy people's lives. If you destroy people's lives for a living, as a literary, right, as a guy that writes books, having an email that said that Donald Trump was aware of the fact that this guy was trafficking young women, that seems to me to be something that you would have used in your quibby. Susan Miller, how are you? I am back, and I'm doing okay. I promise you I am. It was a really terrible night's sleep last night. And it was funny, I called Reese right after it happened, and she said, why don't we cancel for tonight? I said, no, I feel fine. She said, you probably won't in a while. I said, yeah, I don't think that's the case. And it did not take long before I felt like I had been hit with a baseball bat. So once again, I was wrong. David, good to see you. Glad you're here. So I'm not telling you that Donald Trump is a good guy. I don't think he is. I also think, and I have said this from the beginning, if there were any dirt facts, we would have heard it already. I tend to believe this. I tend to believe that this is probably a bit of a nothing burger. However, just critical thinking, that first email scares me. And it scares me because it was sent in 2011, right? This is a very long time ago. This is before this dude was looking to be a president. Why wouldn't this have come out before? The timing is suspect. All this needs to be released before we jump to conclusions. Trump knowing it is bad, but I still don't believe he abused minors. I don't either. If he had abused minors, I promise you that leverage would have been used, and we would have seen him unseated as a president. Instead, they came up with these ridiculous things about him colluding with Russians to steal the election. Here's the problem I have with all of this. One of the two people, right, Ghislaine Maxwell, is trying to get out of prison, right? That's what she is doing. Give you a quick overview. She was charged with 2 counts of perjury in 2020 for allegedly lying during 2016 depositions in a civil defamation lawsuit filed by Virginia Giuffre against Maxwell. These charges stemmed from her denying involvement in Epstein's sex trafficking activities. Denial of recruiting underage girls. In 2016 deposition, she repeatedly denied recruiting underage girls for sexual encounters with Epstein or powerful men, claiming she never facilitated such activities despite later trial evidence proving otherwise. This is a woman that can't be trusted. Claims of no knowledge of abuse. She testified under oath that she was unaware of Epstein's sexual abuse of minors, denied any role in introduction to girls for illicit purposes, contradicting victim testimonies. The outcome of her perjury charges, as after her 21 conviction on sex trafficking charges, resulting in a 20-year sentence. Prosecutors dropped the perjury counts in 2022 as part of the deal, avoiding a separate trial. That stinks to me. The fact that when Epstein was convicted in Florida, the United States government said to him, we're not going to prosecute you federally. We're not going to take your really beautiful house where you were doing all of these things to underage girls, right? We're not going to do that. And we're not going to charge any other co-conspirators, named or unnamed. A person that could come along 3 years later and you find out that they were in the house doing things to young women with Epstein, that person will not be charged because they are an unnamed co-conspirator. What the hell was Epstein doing for the United States government? And it wasn't Trump in office when that happened, folks, right? So what was going on with this man? I think that the larger picture, and I'll get to it in a second, though. Recent 2025 Department of Justice interview, July of this year. Maxwell was interviewed by the Department of Justice. She denied knowledge of any Epstein client list or additional crimes, providing no incriminating information on others, which some view as continued evasion despite of her conviction. She did more than that, though, right? She did more than that. She went in there to do this interview, and she brought up what had happened. Her appeal was not based on, hey, I'm innocent. Her appeal was based on, we had a deal. You're not supposed to prosecute me. The federal government said that deal is only for Florida. And I'll tell you something. I'm not sticking up for a weirdo. I think she should spend 20 years in prison and then get out and maybe do 20 more. That being said, if you have a deal with somebody and you say, as a federal government, I am not going to be doing. Hi, Tommy. I've just been watching Jesse on Fire, and he has emails from 2021 that Epstein and Maxwell were setting a trap for Trump. It's there in the emails. Go watch him. You know, I'm not going to, with all due respect, and I don't mean any disrespect by this. But I used to be a subscriber of that channel, and I don't talk about content creators. But this is a guy who says things that don't bear out. And when you do deep dive research on it, he very often says things that don't end up being validated after all of the facts are in. Now, I do believe 100% that they were trying to set them up. And the emails that he is referring to, I am sure in that video, are back and forth between Epstein and Trump. And they talk about how this is leverage, right? You should be working on this, said Ghislaine Maxwell. He is the key to helping us. So it does look a lot like they were trying to set him up from Jump Street. Add to that the fact that the majority of the emails that were leaked were between Epstein and Michael Wolff after Epstein had been convicted. If you're an author and you are having a interesting conversation with a convicted sex offender, like he's your best friend, I think your credibility is suspect anyway, honestly. I think the other shoe will drop, Mr. Trump, when Andrew Mountbatten Windsor dirt starts to be revealed. I think, and welcome, Karen Harris, I think that what we're going to see is a push, and this is probably what is going on. There's going to be a very big push to release these emails. And I mean, the entire Epstein files. I'm happy about these emails. I don't necessarily believe them, but I'm happy about it because it is going to get more people demanding that the entire Epstein files are released. When Ghislaine Maxwell said there was no Epstein list, there was nothing like that, there's evidence that says there were books printed, like books bound with pictures of young girls that allegedly rich, powerful men from around the world could flip through and say, oh, I like Lisa on page 8. Well, I assure you, if those books are in existence, and I believe that they were at one time, then she was aware of that. I think Ghislaine Maxwell is probably more guilty than Epstein. I have said many times, and her father being who he was, her dad was a spy. He was a spy that was such a big deal in Israel that he was buried in basically like laid in rotunda kind of thing. It was right near the Wailing Wall. And Democrats blocked the House thing today to release all of the files. You know, these files, I think, are going to be absolutely devastating. And I think that, I've said this before, I think the reason that these files are not being released is because one of two things is happening. It is going to implicate so many huge people, more importantly, so many countries. I think Israel is filthy in this. Ehud Barak coming to see Epstein 30 times, right, and saying, I didn't know the guy was a sex offender, is literally the dumbest thing I've ever heard. The dumbest thing I've ever heard. Right? He used to be prime minister of a country that has the Mossad, but he couldn't get information from the Mossad on who this guy was. They just had business dealings. I think that there's a lot of world leaders. I think that there's a lot of countries. And I think that it would be devastating because you would have people saying, why are we sending military equipment to Israel? Why are we supporting them in the conflict that's going on in Gaza? If this is what they're doing, right? If it's by any means necessary and they're willing to see 2,000 young girls molested so that we can move forward the agenda. That is a very serious issue, right? That is a very, very serious issue. She's the worst person ever, says Michelle Smokes. I believe she is. I absolutely believe that Ghislaine Maxwell ran this operation. I think that, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Her dad was a guy that at the end of his life, he was stealing from the retirement funds of his own business to live on. Prior to that, he had borrowed from those same accounts to further the aims of the Mossad. This is what has been researched. I think it is highly likely, and it's probably provable. I also think that Maxwell, her dad, was killed by them. I certainly don't believe he fell off of that boat, right? And I also don't believe that we're going to ever know the truth on exactly what happened in terms of them trying to clean up all of the mistakes that they've made. I think that if we look at it, people like Epstein being killed in prison, and I do believe he was killed. Also, you had Jean-Luc Brunel, who also hung himself in prison, right? Kind of convenient that they all just keep, disappearing. And then there's Virginia Giuffre, also a very, very convenient, right, death, Why didn't Biden release them? That's great. Or yeah, release them. That's great ammo. If Trump was in those files, Biden would have released them. I think that those files are radioactive. As a woman, it is something else and disgusting as F if you know people like Ghislaine Maxwell is a thing. Yeah, now here's the deal though. By way of full disclosure, so we know who Jeffrey Epstein is. The whole world knows who Jeffrey Epstein is. We know that the planes were called the Lolita Express. But at one time in my lifetime, in New York, he was in a newspaper for being the most eligible bachelor in New York. At one time, he was flying in people like Stephen Hawking, right, to the islands. Stephen Hawking wasn't going down there to molest girls. He was going down there because Epstein was throwing these massive things where he was bringing in some of the smartest physicists in the world. As a spy, his job was to look legitimate. So he flew around. He went to all of these parties. He donated to the right groups. He went to the right grand openings, and he met people. In these files that were released, it also says when certain people's planes were taking off and landing, and there's no ties necessarily from these people to him. But if you're a spy, you're developing potential leads. They make a big deal of Elon Musk being invited to the island. Epstein invited everybody to the island. Elon Musk didn't go to the island. There were a lot of people that were invited, right? There are a lot of people. We know that there are certain people who absolutely were there. Those things can be documented, right? There are people that we know were there. Correct. Karen Harris said, Virginia asked if she was ever been in the company of Epstein and Trump together, and she said no. Correct. She's also perjured herself more than anyone on earth. And once, you know, from a court of law standpoint, once you've gone in and lied about things under oath, then anything you say kind of starts to look suspect. I'm not sure whether or not that can be believed. And I think the question was, had she ever been in the company of Epstein and Trump together when there was a young girl around or something along those lines? And the reason that I say that is because there are pictures of them together, right? So they were absolutely at grand openings or galas or parties or whatever. And she had definitely been at Mar-a-Lago at the same time with Epstein and Trump. Maybe her family had some skeletons of their own. She couldn't say some things. Well, look, there could be a, Virginia v. Ghislaine. So Ghislaine Maxwell, I believe, right now is probably I believe right now that the most dangerous person on planet Earth to politics and to geopolitics is Ghislaine Maxwell. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up, dying in her sleep or hanging herself or any of the other things that could happen. She said that she never saw the. She's a patent liar, right? She is somebody that we know for a fact is a liar. There's a picture of her standing next to Virginia Giuffre. Virginia Giuffre said never in the same room. You know what else though? Virginia Giuffre also said that I am of the belief that her attorney, can't think of his name, someone will help me, that Epstein's attorney, Virginia Giuffre said that was one of the people she was forced to sleep with. She then backed away from that. And I think very often that in these kind of situations, the manipulation that was going on, that man went to the island, right? There's no debating that. The flight logs show that he went to those islands. This is the gentleman who used to be a professor at Harvard. He represented Epstein in his trial in Florida. Somebody help me out with his name. You know who I'm talking about. Yes, I agree with you, Tara. I think that Virginia probably didn't say some things because she was scared for a lot of different reasons, right? I think the reason that she said that she was forced to sleep with Epstein's attorney and then changed her mind and said no, that she hadn't, probably had something to do with fear. But this is a guy that has written papers that you can go and look at, and he believes that the age of consent should be lowered. You don't run into a lot of men who say that the age of consent should be lowered, right? That's kind of a thing that most people don't say, right? Somebody help me. Let me get it real quick. See if I can find this in here. You guys are going to have to bear with me for a second. One moment. I know I have it in here. So Alan Dershowitz, thank you. Who is that? Yes. Thank you, Cindy G. Alan Dershowitz. This is a guy who has been vocal about thinking that the age of consent should be lowered. That's terrifying to me. He is also, this is kind of his bread and butter, right? He's represented a lot of people in these kinds of lawsuits. Now, from a legal standpoint, everybody deserves a defense, right? There is nothing wrong with that, right? Everyone is supposed to have a defense, and you give people like Epstein the best defense possible so that they cannot get out on appeal. If the system works, you give them a great defense and they still go to prison. The trouble is our system doesn't work. So he didn't even have to face his accusers. And they broke federal law by cutting him a deal without ever talking to any of the victims. That is a federal law. Don't burn the food, right? Says Mechanic. I appreciate the help, Cindy G, but don't burn the food. So this has stunk from day one. The question becomes, how big is it? When Epstein's case got dropped in Florida, there was only 2 people that could do that, for real. Because when you get into the federal system and you've got the head of the Florida federal prosecutor's office, his orders either came from the head of the DOJ, right, or the attorney general. If it wasn't, right, the head of the DOJ is the attorney general. If not, it had to be the president of the United States. Acosta was the prosecutor, and the attorney, right, was so Acosta was the one that made the deal. He had to have taken his marching orders from either the president or the attorney general who runs the Department of Justice. That's not the kind of order that just comes down from nobody, right? That's not the kind of thing that comes down from nobody. And Acosta got a cabinet position in the next, when Trump took office, he got a cabinet position. It makes you wonder if every single one of these people, Republican, Democrat, all of them, the Democrats had the files, didn't release them. The Republicans had the file, didn't release them. All of these people are hiding something, right? They are all hiding something. There are either Republicans and Democrats through the entire file, or it's our allies. We find out that MI6 knew about this and did nothing, right? And then we find out that that the Mossad was deeply involved in all of this. If you look into the Clinton Global Initiative, which is a charity that they started under the Clinton Foundation, it was started with the assistance of Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein's Lolita Express, putting Bill Clinton on it, flying him to Africa to make speeches for $10 million. I spent a great deal of time in the public speaking arena. It was something I did for a living. $10 million? Nobody makes $10 million for a speech. I don't care who you are. $10 million is not the kind of money that gets paid for a speech. It's the kind of money that you launder by giving somebody $10 million for a speech, and then they let you into the office of the Secretary of State, right? If you look at the percentage of people that met with Hillary Clinton while she was Secretary of State, more than half of them donated millions, if not tens of millions of dollars to her charity. They got rich. They got rich, and it was just nasty. Virginia, good to see you. Thank you for stopping in. So am I here to tell you that that Trump is guilty? I'm not. But I'm here to tell you that he's guilty of something. I don't think he's guilty necessarily of that they will be able to prove that he was with young women anywhere on that island or anything else. But I do believe that what he's doing right now, yeah, that's it. Tara pretty much nailed this. There it is in a nutshell. I'm into brass taxes. They all know, and they did, and they told nobody. Correct. Which means that they will absolutely be willing to sacrifice 2,000 young ladies' lives and souls, right, to further the cause of whatever that cause happened to be. And it seems to me, Woman of Wonder says, definition of pay to play. I believe wholeheartedly that the reason they're not releasing these files is because they can't figure out a way to not implicate other countries in what Epstein was doing. There is no chance in hell. Epstein, when they raided his house in New York, he had fake passports, right? Not the kind you buy at a Tijuana flea market. He had fake passports that got him in and out of the Middle East. Now, he said his defense was, well, I was a Jew, and during that time, it was really dangerous, and it was, right? There was a murder of a guy on the Achille Lauro. Having a U.S. passport could get you killed. So he had a passport with someone else's name on it. That's not the kind of thing you just grab. This is the kind of thing that is made by intelligence agencies, like the Central Intelligence Agency or like the Mossad. And as we've talked about in the past, if you go back and you research the Iran-Contra affair, the money that was being moved around during that was being moved by Jeffrey Epstein. Didn't get prosecuted. His name didn't even pop up anywhere. Those kind of things don't happen to real people. They happen to spies. They happen to people who are protected by governments. You don't get caught, right? With 36 victims. Now, that was 36 victims ready to go to court. The number was at least double that they knew about in Florida. But those 36 victims, you don't write that off for some dude. You write that off for a spy. And what they're afraid is going to come out in these files, in my humble opinion, is that we're dirty. We're filthy. The United States of America is. Israel is. I believe that MI6 knew what was going on. And there's a lot to back this up. I'm not pulling this out of my backside. There was a story that was killed, an ABC story that was killed by who? By who? The Queen, right? The royal family reached out and said, you're going to kill that. Yeah, Tara. Well, here's the thing. The reason that number is 36 is because very often when you get this kind of case, which is, again, we know that almost half of people who are sexually assaulted never come forward, never report it, don't tell anybody. So that's on the top, right? But when people do come forward and they start to tell their stories, they're then asked, are you willing to go into court? And if you started out with 77 or you started out with 120, 36 is a number of people that said, yes, I will put my name on this. I will go into court. And how were they rewarded? They were rewarded by this guy getting weekends for 13 months. He was able to come in at night, spend the night, and then leave during the day to go do whatever he wanted to do. That's a deal that a sex offender gets, right? And then not be prosecuted by the federal government for these crimes, although they're federal offenses. Not have his assets seized and have the promise of any of your friends that we find out later might be a unnamed co-conspirator, they won't be charged either. If you think that's a deal that they just give to somebody because they're rich, then you don't understand the game. You might be able to get out of trouble because someone's rich. We need our aluminum foil hats again. You know what? We don't. Not on this one. But I do dig a tinfoil hat. But everything that I'm telling you is absolutely researchable. These are facts. This man got a deal that literally let him walk on molesting 36 young girls. He got to keep his property, and he got to spend 13 months just going in at midnight and sleeping until the sun came up. That's usually a DWI, a first DWI charge. That's the kind of thing that you can do those kind of deals on, right? And you got to have a lot of money. Bingo. And they did not, this is a federal offense. They did not tell the victims or the survivors. You can't just tell them. You literally have to go and say, this is what we're planning to do, and have them give you some kind of approval. And it sure as hell didn't happen. My tinfoil hat is multi-layered and strong at this point. It is a top hat. I had 3 DWIs. I got into way more trouble. Well, Tara, you are not a spy or a billionaire, right? By the way, a billionaire, how? Well, he was a well-renowned Wall Street trader. I can't find a trade. I can't find one trade. You realize that when you trade, you have to fill out forms that don't go away. I can go and look up traders that are 7 to 10 years gone and see what trades they executed. What trades they executed while they were working that job. This man traded nothing. Nothing. It's not what he did. What he was good at was moving large amounts of money without people getting hip to it. That's what he did. He did it at first for a man named Adnan Khashoggi, right? They changed when his, I believe it was either his son or his nephew got killed. They changed it to Khashoggi. But when I was growing up, they said Khashoggi. Adnan Khashoggi was the world's biggest arms dealers. Had a room in his mansion made of gold. No joke. Had a living room where everything in it was made of gold. So this guy had a lot of money, right? And he needed Jeffrey Epstein to help him move money around. Last night was cloudy here in Arizona. Clear skies tonight. Hopefully we can get photos of the red sky. Do it. Love to see them. At this stage of the game, all 3 of my sons have tinfoil hats. That's a good thing. Trump loves gold. Everybody loves gold. I'm not going to hate on anybody for that. I'm a big fan of gold. Gold is a beautiful thing. Right? It doesn't corrode. If you study that material, it's absolutely evolved. Do you know that if you put 60 pounds of it in your backyard, it would be gone in about 4 years? It literally will just keep sinking until it hits bedrock. When they mine the stuff, they find bedrock, and the gold sits on top of it. Until it hits something that's made of stone, it will just continually go down. It's a fascinating material. It really is. And if you want your tinfoil hat on, right, that is why the Anunnaki came here. They came here to get our gold so they could pulverize it, put it in their atmosphere. Sorry. I have 45 ounces I dug from the ground. That is the coolest thing anyone has said in my chat in a really long time. I am done with Virginia's book. I finished Virginia's book 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. I will be doing a show on it coming up. It is hard. No, I would not sell my soul for gold. Yeah, those that do are not good people. I agree with that 100%. But you know what's even skeezier? Because riches, those are something that everybody kind of dreams that they're going to be rich someday, right? I'm more freaked out by people that want power. I'm more freaked out by people that are willing to do anything on earth to gain power. That to me is way more terrifying. I understand greed. I was a criminal. The power thing doesn't make any sense to me. I don't believe Virginia took her own life. She had 3 kids and apparently was said to have made it clear that she wouldn't be unaliving herself. The suicide note, just got this video blocked. The suicide note that she left didn't sound like that kind of note at all. In fact, it was rather upbeat. It sounded more like, I'm not going to quit, right? I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to let it happen, right? So that seemed really odd. I'll tell you what else I think is really odd. We don't know how she took her own life. Is that normal? I mean, honestly. So allegedly, she killed herself about a half a year ago, and no one has said she hung herself. She shot herself. She took a bunch of pills. None of these things, right? One of her friends also died of a drug overdose, but apparently wasn't doing drugs. So I think they're cleaning up messes. They're in the process of cleaning up their messes. I think that's what happened to Jean-Luc Brunel. I think that's what happened to Jeffrey Epstein. And I think that the big one now, they're trying to go the other route. They did the stick on the other people, and now they're working on the carrot. It's all very suspicious. I mean, and the world doesn't go, how is it that we don't know how this woman took her own life? It's taken you 6 months to do an autopsy and let that out to the world? That doesn't pass the smell test. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Especially when the entire world is on the edge of their seat concerning what's going on with the Epstein. 4 out of 5? 4 out of 5 Americans say they are following this closely. There aren't 4 out of 5 Americans that can agree that water is good for your body. So 4 out of 5 Americans following the Epstein thing and being pissed about it makes this a very unique situation in our country. It also confuses and adds chaos. Of course it does. Big time. But the whole world is watching so close that maybe they're just coming up with a really good story, because I don't think she killed herself. I can't prove that. I'm telling you, I don't think it, right? Absolutely, it's a think thing. But it doesn't make sense to me. She waited with all of that hell beating down on her for all of those years and then becomes a multimillionaire and has a book that's about to come out and thinks, now is the time I want to take myself off earth. Now that the whole world is starting to believe me, now that the whole world is seeing some kind of justice happening. Epstein's dead. Ghislaine Maxwell's in prison. Former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. All of this is going on, and she thinks, this is the time I'm going to leave Earth. Doesn't make any sense at all. Not to me. And the fact that they're not telling us how she did it kind of hammers that home. It's very convenient that all of these people that could have really blown the lid off of this hung themselves in prison, right? Two different sides of the pond. But both of them just decided to take themselves out. Doesn't smell right. Yeah, you know, it's a good point. It absolutely is a good point. They should check Trump's BlackBerry. Trouble with that is BlackBerries are really hard to check. That's why criminals used to use them. They were military encrypted. They were fantastic. That's why they're out of business. No joke. All I know is that we do not know the mindset of someone who wants to unalive themselves. If I say too many of them, they'll just demonetize me too. As a person myself, they suck for doing this to everybody. I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. Another point, that book was already written too. Yeah, no, she was about ready to have, she was already doing interviews. The world was already, right, celebrating her as a brave human being that was going to bring down one of the most disgusting chapters in the history of the planet. And at that point, think of all the years that she had to endure this when people said, that's BS, right? These are good people. Come on, the prince was in on this, come on, right? She endured all that. But once people started believing her, she decided she didn't want to live anymore. That to me doesn't pass the smell test. Yeah. Yes, positive life. Did I know that Bannon spent years with Epstein during Trump's first term? Lots of footage. I didn't know he spent years with him. I definitely know that they were in correspondence and that there was footage. That missing minute video was so wild because you literally couldn't even see his cell. It was completely around the corner. I'll tell you something more wild. They don't allow cameras to be out. They don't. That's not a BOP thing. If you read the policies, if a camera's out, they send somebody up to fix it. But they wanted to tell us that there was only 2 cameras in that unit working. That night, he was allowed, Epstein, was allowed out of his cell to make an unmonitored phone call. If you understand the Bureau of Prisons, and I unfortunately know a lot about the Bureau of Prisons, but if you understand their policies, he can't leave the cell. He's in a segregated housing unit. The only way you can leave is with 2 guards and your hands cuffed behind your back. But you know those food slots that you slide trays through? You have to put your hands through those and get handcuffed before you leave. And you can't make an unmonitored call anywhere in a prison. An unmonitored call, so we don't know who he called. We don't know what they talked about. We don't know any of that. And what happened to the 2 people that were sitting there? This is great. I did a show on this, but in case you missed it, the way that the SHU is set up, there is a rotunda, right? It's just a big open area. It has stairs going up to all the different tiers. And that's where the cops sit. Those tiers have anywhere between 6 to 8 cells on each side going down. Guys scream to one another all night because you don't ever get out of your cell. So they'll yell down, hey, Tommy, what's up? You heard? After everything, they end with you heard. And then you come back with, yeah, I heard, not doing anything, so blah, blah, blah. They have, within the Bureau of Prisons, taken complaints within the union of people that work as prison guards because the noise inside that place is unbearable. They say on average, right, throughout the day, anywhere between 80 and 110 decibels. But these 2 were sleeping. The other thing that came out from that is they didn't call the count in twice. If you don't call the count in, or if you call the count in and the number's wrong, the prison goes into lockdown. There's never been anybody that just didn't call in a count. Counts are called in religiously. 2 people walk the tier and they check. They both count. They get to the end. They got the same number. They go down. They call it in. They slept through 2 of them. And when they were awake, they were looking at things on their phones. Doesn't happen. It is a 100% impossibility. The other thing they like to tell you is, well, the cameras didn't work, but we would have seen if anybody went up the stairs. What do you think happens if a riot takes place? What do you think happens if 2 inmates get a guard and get his weapons, which would only be a taser in some cases, but if they got him and had control of the guard, what do you think happens? They come through the front door? No. They have multiple entrances to all of those units. They have doors in places that go to nowhere. They go to catwalks, right? Places that inmates never see. So that when the goon squad, normally referred to as the DRT, hey, it's the love of my life. Good to see you. Glad you're here. We're live in 3 minutes. Wow. Can that be right? Did it take me that long to get this thing up and running? Yeah, that sounds about right. So the Dirt Squad, the DRT team, they dress like Ninja Turtles. They've got on head helmets. They've got on arm pads, knee pads, and they go, cha, cha, cha. They wouldn't have come through the front door. So if someone wanted to get to his cell, they didn't have to go up those stairs, but they reported that as if it was a fact. Nothing that we were told was real. I'm telling you, just from a guy that spent years in the segregated housing unit. I'm not joking. Years. I spent 3.5 years in the segregated housing unit on 1 infraction. All right, people, I'm going to be talking about L. Ron Hubbard, Jack Parsons, and Aleister Crowley over on Cults and Crims. This ought to be a wild one. It talks a little bit about how Scientology sort of came into being. Thank you for everybody that was here tonight. This was a great conversation. We will be revisiting this. You have my word. Between now and the next time I see you, get your butt over to Cults and Crims. It's going to be a good one. I'm Tommy. See you on the next one. Have a great night. See you soon, baby.